Welcome stars. In this video I'm introducing you to fellow astrologer Norma Lachance, who has created the Lachance method of calculating Antiscia and CONTRA-ANTISCIA in natal charts. Recently I got together with my good friend Norma, who is a mathematician, numerologist and astrologer, and you have met her before here on my channel. We did do a collaboration for a numerology video and you could check that out here. However, this time Norma is going to be sharing with us her simple yet exact method of calculating Antiscia and CONTRA-ANTISCIA in natal charts, which is not one of the easiest things to spot, and sometimes in the old books they would give you some long complicated way of calculating and working out which planets were in Antiscia or in CONTRA-ANTISCIA. And she's actually come up with a simple way where you can just eyeball it when you're looking at the natal chart. So this is amazing. I'm really grateful for Norma for joining me today and for sharing her method for doing this calculation, which we are now calling the Lachance method of calculating Antiscia. So I'd like to welcome my special guest, Norma Lachance, who is here. She is an astrologer, mathematician, and has a fabulous podcast called Astrology Today. We'll have a talk about that in a moment. And she's here, and we're going to be talking about Antiscia and how it can benefit you when you're doing astrology readings, to add that certain special something to the reading.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Allison. And you know, Antiscia, CONTRA-ANTISCIA, it sounds complicated already, and there's just so much information in a chart. This is just one more piece to put into your astrological toolkit. So you can, when you look at a chart, if a chart has this, it's interesting to look at, and if it doesn't, you just move along.
Absolutely. So this is what I would call like an intermediate but kind of trick to a chart reading, and we're just going to go through it. In a way it's pretty simple, but you've got to get your head around a bit of stuff. So would you like to share with us where do we base these Antiscia numbers on? Right.
So the Antiscia, CONTRA-ANTISCIA idea basically came from really the changing of the seasons, and that we look at the main axes that are in a chart. And we've got some visuals, we're going to take a look at all of that. But the basic concept is that we look at the Capricorn Cancer line, then we look at the other main axis in the chart, and that is the Aries Libra chart. And those four signs, as you know, is what changes the seasons as the sun ingresses into those four signs.
Okay. Yeah. So would every chart have Antiscia?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I know that when I went through my training with Allison, I had to go through a few charts to find some examples. So yes, it's a little less well known, not like a sun, everybody's got a sun sign, everybody's got an ascendant sign.
Exactly.
But it is interesting if it is there. So it's noteworthy if it is there. So it's worth looking for.
Okay. So would you like to explain to us how to calculate Antiscia then?
Sure. So the Antiscia, we start with, I'm going to stand up now, show off my teaching gigs, is derived from, first of all, finding the Capricorn Cancer line. So in this picture here, it's straight up and down. We have all of the signs in their traditional spots, you know, Aries in the first house and going all the way around. So right up here at the top, we can see here's Capricorn, here's Cancer, and here is this line in the middle. Now I'm going to pull out some math words. Don't worry about it. I'm going to explain it. This is what's called, in math lingo, the axis of symmetry. And so when we talk about Antiscia, and Allison will talk about this later, is if planets are in Antiscia, they are in the same position height-wise, or the amount of sunlight that they're getting, they behold each other. And so, for example, if I had a planet over here, the mirror image of that, imagine that this is the mirror, would be over here, meaning that its distance from the axis of symmetry is the same. So they're kind of mirrors of each other, and that's where the term beholden or beholding to each other comes from. So, and we move all the way around. I mean, I could have a, you know, I'm throwing it out there as an example. You could have a planet here and you could have a planet here, and that creates a mirror image to each other. So the main concept I want you to get is that that axis is the axis of symmetry, like a mirror.
So is it always vertical in the chart?
Oh my gosh, great question. It is not always vertical, and when I first learned this, that messed me up a lot. So it's entirely possible that when we get a chart, oh, I just got inspired, Allison. When we get a chart, it might look like that. you don't, every chart's a little bit different, and if you've looked at them, when you find, the first thing to do is to find that axis, and if it's a little kaflooey like this, that's fine, but the planets are still relative to the center line here, beholden to each other. They're still reflective. Yeah, really good question. Now, since we're here, let's just hop to contra-ANTISCIA, and then I'm going to show you my fun little trick that I like. So I'm now contra-ANTISCIA. Notice that again, the signs are in their traditional positions, Aries in the first, right, and away we go. But here, we're looking at the axis between Aries and Libra. And, again, if you're kind of a mathy person, horizontal, where we can think of ANTISCIA as vertical, but again, it can be kaflooey. That's a technical term, never mind. Okay, so here, again, our axis of symmetry is, we imagine there's a mirror here. So I could have a planet right here, then the mirror image of that, well, where is that going to be? Oh gosh, Norma, look at you trying to figure this out. Well, that's probably going to be about there, so that they are mirror images of each other, and you can see that the arrows, how they hook up. I might have a planet here, then that mirror image would be over there. Okay? Side note, I was doing a little bit of reading for this in preparation. Robert Hand, very well-known mathematician and astrologer, he actually defines ANTISCIA and CONTRA-ANTISCIA as you find the two planets and where's the midpoint, because he's really into midpoints, right? And so the midpoint is what is the axis of symmetry. So you could just think of it as they're the same distance away. Now, in terms of interpretation, contra-ANTISCIA is different than ANTISCIA in that here we have one that is above on this side of the axis of symmetry and one on the other. So here what we have is we have one planet that is obeying or obedient, and the other one is commanding, as opposed to in ANTISCIA when they are beholding each other, kind of supporting each other. Here there's definitely kind of a power imbalance where the commanding one is a bit stronger or overpowers or tells the other planet what to do, and the other one is obeying.
So in contra-ANTISCIA, you would have one commanding planet and one obeying planet, whereas in ANTISCIA, they are both beholden to each other.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Kind of on the same level.
All right.
All right. So I think we've got the basic concept of the axis of symmetry, or the Capricorn Cancer line, or in this case, the Aries Libra line. So let's now look at, so I have this little anecdotal story. I hope Allison doesn't mind that I share.
Of course, that's why you're here.
And that is, when I did my homework for Allison, and let's face it, I'm a teacher, a great student. I just gave her droves of homework. So I'm doing this ANTISCIA, contra-ANTISCIA homework. And I'm like, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And after having done a lot, which I think it's important to do, I just kind of came up with a little formula for myself. I hand in my homework, and once we got back together, Allison says, Allison's forgotten what she said, it's fine. Okay. Allison says, oh my gosh, Norma, I've never seen this before. We're going to call it the Lachance Method of ANTISCIA, which it's not patented anywhere, people. Anyways.
But you heard it first here.
So you'll notice here we are, we're back in the ANTISCIA chart, or the ANTISCIA with the line of symmetry here between the diagram, thank you, between Capricorn and Cancer. And you'll notice these arrows here. And what that indicates is, that I match up these signs. So for example, Capricorn, Sagittarius, Aquarius, and Scorpio. Don't help me now, I can do it. Pisces and Libra. So these are the pairs of signs that we are looking for. Aries, Virgo, I'm going to call it Taurus, and Leo, and then finally Gemini and Cancer. So your first test is, step number one is to find this axis of symmetry, the Capricorn Cancer line. Second job is, do you have planets in the signs that pair up? So do you have planets in both Capricorn and Sagittarius? Do you have planets in both Aquarius and Scorpio? And so on all down the line. So that's step two. Step three is, based on whichever pair they are, perhaps you have, let's just take a specific example. Maybe you have a planet at, let's say you have Venus at 12 degrees Aries, and you have, I'm going to say Virgo, or pardon me, Virgo, Mercury at 19 degrees Virgo. All right? So let's just say that happens. I'm hoping that you can pick off all those symbols, right? So Venus, 12 degrees Aries, Mercury at 19 degrees Virgo. So our test is we add up the two angles. I know, you're thinking, really? 31 degrees. In this case, when the angles add up to 30, within a degree of orb, we usually choose 1 or 2 degrees.
Yes, yes.
2 probably for beginners, 1 if you really want to be specific. If it's within 1 to 2 degrees, then we say that it is Antiscia. Oh God,
If it's in 1 or 2 degrees of what?
Of 30 degrees.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. So this means that 30 degrees, 2 degrees one way could be 28 degrees, all the way up to 32 degrees. If you want to tighten that up, you can go from 29 degrees to 31 degrees. That's the way to tighten it up. Does that, I mean, I was about to say, does that make sense? You can tell I'm a teacher and I'm used to having, hope it makes sense. Yeah, let us know. Hope you're commenting while you're listening. So what we've done is we've looked at, and let's just take for an example that it's cockeyed like that. Where would, have I got that
Where
right?
would 12 Aries go? Yes.
Where would 12 Aries go? Well, 12 Aries would, now it's hard to do it at this angle. So 12 Aries would be, I would say,
Right there,
right
yeah.
about there.
Mhm.
And then 19 degrees Virgo would be, here we are, here's where Virgo starts, and then 19 degrees would be about there. So if I took a straight edge, I can see that, well, absolutely, they're at the same, they're reflected of each other. So we would say that they were Antiscia. So you can see that there's a way to visually see it. There's also a way to actually calculate it. All right? Should we do an example?
Could you give us an example of one that's not in Antiscia?
Okay, yes, but now I feel like I need a new chart. Well, no, let's do, I bet I can erase this.
Just use a different colour. And so if we'll keep with the Venus at 12 Aries, and say you've got the moon at 2 degrees Virgo.
Yeah, great question. I love questions. All right, let's use a different color. So what did you say? You said moon at
2 Virgo. This is just an example.
2 degrees Virgo.
Because we're still Aries Virgo, which is what you picked out, right?
Right, because step 2 again. So we're thinking, oh, well, you know, there's a potential here that there may be planets that are Antiscia. So again, same process, add the angles up, we get 14 degrees, and we say, well, that's too far away. Remember, our interval, or what we're considering, is from 29 degrees to 31 degrees. That's outside the range, so they are not Antiscia. Now, I did remember, however, when I was reading for this, there are some astrologers that will consider them to be Antiscia by sign. Now, I just want you to take a moment and look at Allison's face. We do not do sloppy astrology. That's what I've been taught. So, I mean, yeah, if you're desperate to have something to talk about in the chart, honestly, that sounds a bit, you know, a bit firm. I have 4 planets in fixed signs. That'll tell you something. So, you know, to me, it's too general. Right? You need to drill down and make sure that it's within an orb. Otherwise, it's not significant. Otherwise, you're just yattering on about a chart. All right?
So can we just be quite clear? What numbers does the have to add up to be Antiscia?
Exact 30 degrees.
Okay.
It has to add up to 30 degrees. We give it ourselves latitude of 1 degree either way.
So that will take us to 28 and 32.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, it's got to be between 28 degrees to 32 degrees in order to be Antiscia and contra-Antiscia, but we'll look at an example of that.
Okay.
All right? All right, let's look at another example.
Yes.
All right, so let's pull up the Antiscia. So again, here are our planets in, or pardon me, the, you know, your wheel with the signs in traditional spots. And we, first of all, step 1 is to find the axis of symmetry, which for contra-Antiscia is between Aries and Libra. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 is, now you'll see that we have up and down arrows here, and Allison was nice enough to. So what are the signs that could possibly be contra-Antiscia? Well, we have Aries and Pisces. So the pairings are different now, right? Taurus and Aquarius. Gemini and Capricorn. Don't help me. Cancer, and Sagittarius. It's never boring with me. Okay. And then we have Leo with Scorpio. And finally, Virgo with Libra. So now our pairings are different. So again, step one, find your axis. We're keeping in mind it might be tilted, right? You got to be careful. Step two, do you have planets in any of these pairs of signs? So let's do an example. Perhaps you have, I don't know, we're going to say you have the sun at 11 degrees Gemini, all right?
Yeah.
And you have the, what else do we want to say? Well, let's go Uranus. Why not? You have Uranus at, I'm going to get myself into trouble, 10 degrees Capricorn. Question is, are they contra-ANTISCIA or not? Step one, we find our axis. Great. Step two, do we have them in the correct pairs of signs? Definitely. Step three, addition. We add these together, we get 21 degrees. Pause for effect. Are they contra-ANTISCIA? No, they're not. It's not close enough. Remember, our range of values is from anywhere from 28 to 32.
32, 28 to 32.
Now, that's the math part. Let's see if we look at our picture and we can identify, well, where's 11 degrees Gemini? Oh, look, I almost got it done here. So here's here's Taurus. So 11 degrees Gemini, look at that. Oh, right there. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think it is. And then 10 degrees Capricorn up here. So you can see that relative to the mirror or the axis of symmetry, yeah, I mean, visually it kind of looks like they could be contra-ANTISCIA. But when you check the numbers, it's actually not close enough.
Right.
All right? So this is what we're talking about, not using sloppy astrology. They kind of look like they could be, right? Which means you need to check.
Yes.
And how do you check? You add the degrees together. If they're close enough to 30, meaning from 28 to 32, then we know that they are, in fact, contra-ANTISCIA.
Fantastic. And at this point, I do want to mention that we do have workmen outside, so if there's banging and crashing, that's just what that is. I will try and edit out as much as possible.
Well, they're just learning about astrology. Lucky them. All right, so any questions about that? That's kind of what I came to. When I did all my homework, this is pretty much what I came to in terms of calculating.
So can you give us an example of one that is contra-ANTISCIA?
Okay, let's do that.
Yes. So again with the sun at 11 Gemini.
Well, let's change the sign so then we can draw different points. Let's do that.
All right.
We'll keep the same planets this time.
Okay.
And we'll change, we're going to say, perhaps we're in Scorpio season,
yes,
so let's do that. So let's say that we're going to, at 9 degrees Scorpio. In fact, I wonder what the sun is at today.
Okay, I'll check that while we're at it.
Let's get interesting.
Let's get today's chart up. Keep going, yeah.
Feel like, okay. So yeah, 9 degrees Scorpio.
5.
Oh, that was close. You want to edit that in?
Let's put that. So we'll use the sun at 5 degrees Scorpio.
Because that's where it is today.
Okay.
So 5 degrees Scorpio. And we're going to have, along with that, so perhaps you have Uranus at, what am I going to say? I'm going to say 23 degrees Leo. All right? So there it is, 23 degrees Leo. Step one is, are they in the correct signs, pair of signs? Leo, Scorpio. Ooh, potential. Step two is to check the numbers. All right? So we add them together. We get 28 degrees. That looks to me like they're contra-ANTISCIA, right? Because remember our window is between 28 and 32. So I would say, yes, they are. Let's look at the picture. 5 degrees Scorpio, where is that? Well, here we are. Here's Libra. 5 degrees Scorpio is just barely over here. All right? Then 23 degrees Leo is going to be over here. Here's 0 Leo. 23 degrees is pretty close to that end here. So here they are. Is that close enough? Well, here's the one, here's the other. You can see that they're basically, they're mirroring each other, right?
Yes.
Now here's a question for you, Allison. She likes to keep me on my toes, so I'm going to try and reciprocate. Which of these two would be obedient and which would be commanding?
So I believe that the commanding are from Aries to Virgo. I am subject to correction. Thank you for that question.
I think it's because we need to.
Yes.
Yeah. So all the signs, that was a good, yeah. So how do we know which ones are commanding and which ones are obedient?
Yes.
So we said, just what you just said was from Aries to
Virgo
are the commanding signs.
Yes.
And that kind of makes sense because, of course, that comprises, when they're in their traditional spots, the northern hemisphere.
Right.
So they're above. That's a
Yes.
nice way to think about it.
Yes.
And then the rest of them, so from Libra all the way to Pisces, are the obedient.
In the northern hemisphere.
In the northern yes.
So here we are in Canada, yeah.
So does that mean that in the southern hemisphere it's...
Yes.
Wow, okay.
So which of the two, of the Sun and the Uranus, will be commanding then?
Well, I would say that it's going to have to be Leo.
Yeah, so that's a tricky one, because then Uranus is contra-ANTISCIA and commanding to the Sun, which really, that's quite a tricky thing to have anyway, isn't
well,
it?
it is tricky. I mean, when you think of in terms of an interpretation, what would that say to you? Like, what would you say to somebody that had contra-ANTISCIA of Uranus, which is what is that? That's the erratic, unexpected type of energy that comes from Uranus, and that is commanding over your sun, over your life purpose.
And Uranus is in Leo as it's doing it, so it's really quite strong on the Sun there, which is kind of interesting, right?
Well, because of of course, because
that's
they're
just a side note, yeah. So this is
kind of a battle here, because wouldn't you not say that because the Sun
in
disposes
Scorpio,
Sun in Scorpio, Sun disposes Uranus. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, interesting. Anyway, so that is, I don't think we could call it the Lachance method of.
So the actual counting up to, you add the 2 up, and it should be near 30, as near as 30 as possible. 2 degrees either side, 28 to 32. That is the Lachance method of instantly deciding whether or not you have planets in Antiscia or contra-Antiscia.
That's right. All right. So the only thing, well, actually, Alice, I would add, that's absolutely right. What I would add to that is, remember, there's always 2 ways to calculate anything in a chart. You can do it visually, so look for your axis of symmetry and see, if they're mirroring each other, or you can do the calculation. Clearly, the calculation is going to give you the exact numbers.
So every chart will have an axis for Antiscia and an axis for contra-Antiscia.
That's right.
And these are at the beginning of the cardinal signs, which is, of course, and they are generated by the Sun's path through the zodiac, starting at Aries, going up equinoctial solstice, equinox solstice, and that's really where these angles of mirroring, what do you call it?
Well, the axis of symmetry.
Axis of symmetry.
That's how they're decided, is based on the cardinal signs.
Sounds like a plot, doesn't it? The axis of symmetry.
It's not a plot, it's just math. But that, and I remember back in school, and now I'm dating myself, we had these things called mira. I don't know if you remember those.
I thought you were going to say slide rule, but go on.
No, I did have a slide rule. And we used to place it on the axis of symmetry, and you could see, to help children visualize what it looks like to imagine what a mirror is. And it can be hard, right? There's so many, astrology is such a visual sport, I was going to say, but it is a very visual medium in terms of all the symbols, all the angles, and so it can be quite difficult. And so it's important, I think, to have different ways of calculating so that everybody can understand it. And really what I'm all about is, it's important to go to a trained astrologer if you have one, but it's also important to feel comfortable with your own chart and be able to calculate all of these things.
Exactly. So not every chart will have planets in Antiscia or contra-Antiscia.
That's right.
But if you do, it needs careful consideration, because you would then, on top of all of having done all of this, we would then want to know, well, are they an aspect as well in longitude, and consider that too. And of course you also want to consider, is it the chart ruler, is it the Sun, or something like that. So what is the importance of these planets that are maybe found in Antiscia anyway, right?
Well, and, in terms of when you're looking at, an intermediate level of an astrologer, it's important to know what's important and what isn't, like where to put the priority and where not to. And so this just adds, another layer of interpretation for you. And just like you said, I mean, clearly in this example, it's the Sun. I mean, the Sun is always an important planet in somebody's chart. And so the fact that they have this connection with Uranus, then that's noteworthy. But you need to know to look for it. And so that's why it's important to have a systematic way of, are you looking at declination? Are you looking at Antiscia? All of the things that could connect planets together.
Yeah. It's super interesting. You know, really, I mean, Antiscia is something that you don't learn immediately. It's something that's, I would call it intermediate stuff. But once you know about it, you start looking for it, and it will add what I call a polish to your readings, which is really what this series is about at the moment. Yeah.
Polish.
A polish to your readings, because okay, let's face it, your basic chart reading is going to be planet in sign, planet in house. That's where everybody starts. But from that point on, you want to start polish your marbles, as we used to say, to become a more fine-tuned astrologer. And interesting. So Norma, do you have any charts, any planets in Antiscia in your chart?
I do not.
Neither do I.
But I did really enjoy learning about it because it was so mathematical. You know, right away I kind of took to it. And anything in astrology that requires calculating, I get very excited.
I draw a blank, but Norma loves it. So do you have someone perhaps close by to you who has two planets in Antiscia that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I actually do. So my partner has, and he loves it when I talk about his chart, he does have two planets in, I want to say, Antiscia.
We'll just pause for a moment.
Yes, we'll pause for a moment. So I believe that my partner has, he is Sagittarius on the ascendant. So I'm just going to try and recreate his chart as best I can. And so I'm changing the angle of it because I know for sure he's got Sagittarius on the ascendant. So that's why I've moved this over here. And yeah, that's starting to look familiar. So he has an planet, I believe it is at, he has Mars at 11 degrees Gemini, and he also has Mercury, I want to say 19 degrees Cancer. And we like to make the joke in our household that he's got a couple of planets in his 7th house here. And this Mercury in his 7th house, yeah, that's me. Because we talk about our relationship all the time.
All the time.
All the time. So if I drew this picture, because this is starting to look familiar to me. So 19 degrees Cancer.
Okay, here's his chart. Let's
great.
There we go.
Okay.
All right.
Fantastic.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. So remember what I said. It can be overwhelming. Right away it's like, oh, what was the first step?
Yes.
Step 1 is to identify, black pen on the table there. Yep. To identify the Capricorn Cancer axis. So you've got to find, so here's Sagittarius, here's Cancer, or pardon me, Capricorn. There it is. So it's here. So you can see how it's a bit cockeyed, right?
Yeah.
So, but if we look over here, oh sorry, this is the wrong angle. There we go. Because here's the end of Gemini, so the beginning of Cancer. So there it is. So you can see we've got a planet here and a planet there, and you're like, they kind of look like they're mirroring each other. So then all I need to do is remember, so step 2 is, I'm going to give my axis over here. Step 2 is, are they in the correct sign? Remember our pairings. One of the pairings is Gemini and Cancer.
Right.
So I have a planet in Gemini, I have a planet in Cancer. In fact, he's got several. 2 planets in Gemini, 2 planets in Cancer. Let's look at the combinations. Well, he's got, as I said, he's got Mars at 11 degrees Gemini. He's got Mercury at 19 degrees Cancer. So if we do the math, we add those up. I know you've already done it in your head. Good job. We get exactly 30. So not only are they in Antiscia, it's very tight. In fact, we could look at the minutes and see how close it is. And you know me, I'm going to want to do that.
Yeah.
So it's 19 degrees 31 and 11 degrees 31. Interesting.
Gotta love tight orbs. Yeah. Okay.
So this is actually a really good example because Paolo, my partner, he's got, here's our axis of symmetry again. So as I said, Mercury and Mars definitely in Antiscia. We can see that from the numbers. But there's another potential here, and that would be the Sun and Venus. Those are in the correct sign. Again, Gemini, Cancer is what we're looking for. But we need to look at the numbers. We always have to look at the numbers.
Yes.
So the Sun for Paolo, he is at 11 degrees Cancer. Oh my goodness, it's all good. It's all good. Back up color. Let's do this one. 11 degrees Cancer. And we have, I want to say Venus. That's correct. Venus at 21 degrees. Yeah, 21 degrees Gemini. Mhm. So here we add up. What do we get? Oh my goodness. What do we get? We get, is that right? 32?
It is.
32. Now again, I'm going to be a bit of a stickler here.
A stickler and go
Let's
for the minutes.
have a look at the minutes. Well, we have them, so why wouldn't we use them?
Why, exactly.
31. So here we go. So if I add, I'm going to take this away now because you have to start on the right-hand side, obviously. So here we add these together. That's 1, 5 plus 3. I know you think it's 8, but in this system, it's actually a 2, and you carry 1, right? Because the 60 carries over. That could be a whole other session, Allison. So then when we add this up, we actually get 33 degrees, 21. I'm going to go out on a limb and say these are not in Antiscia because it's past our orb. Did I calculate that right?
Yeah. So just using the degrees, it seemed to be Antiscia, but by fine-tuning it to the degrees and minutes, we discover it is not in Antiscia.
That's right.
And if anybody would like us to get Norma back to do some general maths on astrology, just write in the comments below.
Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, so in fact, these are not, even though, very close.
Yes.
But not in Antiscia. And so this is what we're talking about, not sloppy astrology. So, you might be desperate to talk about the sun and Venus for this person, but, you're going to have to look at it perhaps in a different way. Whereas here, this is a much stronger argument because they are, of course, within orbs. So we can talk about how Mars and Mercury are behold each other, support each other.
Fantastic.
Perhaps that means very spirited debater. Perhaps it means someone who sees communication as competition.
Yes.
Those could definitely be things to look for when you're looking at your chart. Now, are they also in aspect, I wonder? I feel like they might be semi-sextile.
Okay.
Maybe. No, not enough. No, the orb's too wide. Yeah.
So to be clear, we are only considering planets at this point. We don't look at the node and the vertex and what have you, and certainly not the midheaven or anything like that. We're only considering planets because that is the energy of the chart. So we're looking for, with Antiscia, 2 planets that behold each other and support each other, and with contra-Antiscia, we have the commanding and the obeying planet, the master-slave almost planets.
Yeah.
So kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd be interested to know if you have any planets in Antiscia or contra-Antiscia in your chart, and certainly do write that detail in the comments below.
Oh my gosh, report back. We want to know. Inquiring minds want to know.
So that's a bit of a roundup there on the Lachance method of calculating Antiscia. You can eyeball it, and it's a lot easier than having to do all these complicated maths numbers. And that's certainly, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. Norma, I'd also like you to perhaps share with us a little bit about your astrology podcast and tell our viewers about that.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to plug. So yes, I do a daily podcast. What I do is I take a snapshot of the daily transit and talk about, what to expect for the day. Sometimes I discuss, particular aspects that I find interesting. There's always, I was just saying this morning on my podcast, there's always something interesting to look at with the daily transit. The other thing, I've developed a few interesting segments now. I do horoscopes for the month at the end of one month for the following month. When the sun ingresses, I talk about famous people in those signs, and we look at sun and moon and aspect blends. And what else do I do on my podcast?
So
I take questions.
It's all astrology.
Yeah.
It's everyday astrology, if I can call it that, that you can understand. So how can our listeners tune into your podcast?
Yeah, it's available on Apple, Anchor, or Spotify. You just need to search Astrology 2, the number 2.
I'll put the name at the bottom.
Day. And you can, subscribe, rate, and review. It comes to your feed automatically every day, 5 to 10 minutes, just for your commute on the way to work.
It sounds great. I mean, I've listened to it myself. It's every day. Norma gets a podcast out there, which is I bow to that. Honestly, it takes a lot to do it, and well done on that.
Thank you. Thanks. May I just say, that everything that I've learned about astrology, I owe to this woman. And so if you want any more extensive training in astrology to learn about contra-ANTISCIA, ANTISCIA, all of the items, all of the topics from astrology, check out Allison's website at Starzology for astrology training.
Well, thank you so much. Well, Norma, it's been a pleasure having you over and you sharing with us this super interesting part of astrology. There are many, many things to learn astrology. Once you've got past the basics, you can go into all sorts of interesting things. I mean, to consider all the planets in Antiscia or not, or something like that would be, it's valuable information to help you as an astrologer fine-tune your readings. This is like putting a bit of seasoning on the reading, so you're not just giving a standard reading, you are taking other important things into consideration. Is Mars stronger than the Sun? Because of this, is Uranus commanding the Sun? I mean, these are things that need to be pondered as an astrologer, and certainly with all the charts that I do, and I'm sure with all the charts you do, we always consider Antiscia and contra-Antiscia. Well, thank you, Norma. Thank you very much for joining us today and coming all the way out here to Vancouver to join us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
So there's quite a lot to think about there. Not every chart will contain planets in Antiscia. I don't have any. And not every chart will have planets in contra-Antiscia. So it is something that is not necessarily in all charts. It's, again, as I did say earlier, it's not a beginner topic. It's something that you would come to later in your, I want to say, intermediate astrology period, perhaps in your second year learning. But it's one way of actually, as I said, polishing your readings and polishing your ability to interpret charts for your clients. Antiscia and contra-Antiscia are something that all forecasting and professional astrologers need to use every day in their natal work. If you enjoyed this video, do consider liking, sharing and subscribing to the channel. It does help me, and YouTube likes it as well. I'm Alison Price. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.